So moving on to my mood board and the results of my research. So I started off looking at street fashion, and I went to a number of different fashion blogs and looked on Pinterest, and I was kind of like honing in towards the street fashion kind of area. I liked a lot of the big jackets, the layering. There were some really interesting details and materials used, and I have a few samples here. Some of the stuff I was looking at, you can see up in the top left, there's a couple of guys here, and there's just like a lot of attitude in the shot. And in many of these, there's some really cool kind of poses and general kind of like vibe given off by some of the characters. Some of the color palettes are incredible as well. Very kind of cyberpunk. As I was mentioning, the fabric, the cuts are quite interesting. You can see this guy's got a really interesting jacket here. Big kind of triangle cut into the middle of it. And yeah, generally just some really interesting forms. So that led me on to look at some kind of silhouettes, some interesting silhouettes. Just 3 images here, but they all have very different kind of feelings associated with them. Top one feels very kind of stable but with purpose. Second one's very fluid even though she's standing still, and the last one it feels very sturdy, almost kind of regal with that big kind of neck piece. Down the bottom here is a few details. I was looking at different kind of mix of materials, as well as like that kind of quilting effect on the left. There's an interesting juxtaposition here of a kind of more matte fabric and a kind of glossy quilted fabric. I thought that was quite interesting. And at the end here, there's a little crop of an image, and it's highlighting a kind of more synthetic material. I think that might be interesting in a kind of science fiction setting. So I also looked at some kind of Japanese, I guess, like motifs. So there's some stuff that relates back to feudal Japan. There's like this mask, this Japanese demon mask, and I think below is either some kind of cosplay or some kind of makeup someone did, but it looks like a Japanese demon. I thought it was quite interesting symbology. Maybe something that I can use within some of the gangs. Maybe this gang is has some kind of roots with the Yakuza, or they're kind of maybe their theme, they're these kind of like devils or something. So that was kind of what I kind of put on that area. It's just a small section, but I thought it might add an extra flavor. Similarly, rather than directly looking at the fashion and the technology, you can draw a lot from nature. So here I have a selection of images, some insects, we've got a flower and this kind of tree frog. And not only are there some absolutely fantastic color combinations, but there's some really interesting shapes. So I'm thinking, when I'm designing my hard surface details, kind of looking at this to get some inspiration, and try and make something a little different, but also kind of understandable because it appears naturally. Next, I'm going on to the architecture. It's only a small section, but it's good to understand the visual language of the world. So I imagine it's going to be a lot of high rises, a lot of hard kind of shapes, very angular. So maybe that's something that I kind of want to reflect in my own designs. And lastly, this section here was looking at kind of the tech and hard surface. And this isn't as important now, but when it comes to detailing and making things look believable, having this kind of reference is really useful. You can see how things are put together, different techniques for making things move, you can understand how things are serviced and the kind of materials and construction methods for them. Overall, a page that kind of covers many different bases. This, like I say, is just a fraction of the research, but it gives you an idea of the type of stuff I'm looking at.